Welcome to the history of England from 410 AD to just before the Norman invasion of 1066. Episode 2, A Shaky Start. In 477 AD, a Saxon called Eyre landed near Selsey in the Sussex coast and fought the Welsh. That is the term used in the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle and seems to be interchangeable with the Britons at this time. By 491, Eyre had extended his kingdom by besieging Andervytum, modern-day Pevensey, and slaughtered all those inside. Then, in 501 AD, another Jute attacked the Roman harbour of Portus Aederni and seems to have taken his name of port from it. Today, this is the important naval city of Portsmouth. The Jutes also settled in the Isle of Wight. For the first half of the 6th century, the whole of Britannia is under siege. The Jutes have conquered Kent and Hampshire, the Saxons have landed in Essex, southern and western England along the River Severn. The Angles have launched assaults all the way up the eastern seaboard of the North Sea. Both the Angles and Saxons used the rivers to force their way inland. Their craft are early types of longboat, mostly with no sails, just oars. The Severn River in the west leads to the Avon, deep inland. The Humber on the North Sea coast, allowing a westward advance, delves still deeper inland, leading south along the Trent, right into the heart of the country to modern-day Nottingham and Leicester. The Britons have no cohesive defence. There appears to be a hodgepodge of local chiefs. The Christian monk, Gildas, our only near contemporary source, is outraged that Britannia is full of people who have not left their sins, and Britons are impotent in repelling their foes. The Britons are also accused of fleeing overseas or into the mountains to the west, and that they are neither brave in war nor faithful in peace. So as the invaders arrive, the land has new owners. The people change their language, different lifestyles are incorporated, along with a new system of rules and gods. The cities, except for York and London, are virtually deserted, and the farmsteads become the centre of life. Note, I use the term farmsteads. The Anglo-Saxon invaders did seem to hate or distrust large towns and cities. The two that survive are on navigable rivers, and the old Roman buildings of 2 stories or more have been built over, and the new Saxon communities are small compared to the size of the Roman times. The Roman villas are left to neglect. This fits the fact that the invaders would have no idea how a hypercaust central heating would work, found in the wealthy homes of the Romans, and also were not interested in 2- and 3-story buildings from a construction point of view, as they required techniques of which they were ignorant. So mostly the invaders just lived in farms, in hamlet to village-sized communities. So communities develop around a farm. The Scandinavian longhouse is seen in England. Now I propose the number of Britons being conquered was probably a lot lower than has been surmised by many others, but fits the idea that part of the reason for the collapse of the Roman Empire in the West was population reduction. The DNA evidence of both the Northern Europeans who invaded England and the ancient Britons is traceable to the Basque region of France and Spain. However, there is a distinct traceable splitting between the two a few hundred years earlier. But then mathematics comes into play. The DNA evidence is not as secure as you may think. The Romans were wealthy and middle class, and as a consequence favoured small families. Also, plague had hit the empire. A population of the whole island of Britain could well have been below 1 million. In fact, I think it was well below 1 million. This is at odds with what many historians propose. However, one only has to look at London, or Londinium as it still was. Check out what the population was supposed to be in 5th century, and you will commonly find 25,000 is quoted. Really? Roll on the floor laughing. There were not the logistics in place to support more than maybe 5,000. Also, look at any plans of the city at that time. There are 2 farms within the Roman walls, reducing population density. Even with a couple of hundred farms in the close vicinity of the city, of which there is little archaeological evidence, how does one support 25,000 people? Also, what are they employed at doing? Twiddling their thumbs? One either worked the land, or you pegged it back in the 5th and 6th century. There were a few blacksmiths, traders, potters, but no reading and writing. Glassmaking was disappearing. Why would 25,000 farm workers live in London? They didn't. And what alternative work would they be employed at? There was not the volume of trade. Smithing and making pots, not in their thousands. If the population is high, yes, but the numbers of invaders are low, and this fits in with a low population being conquered. And also why the language takes over so completely, which it does. You do not get a minority taking control and the majority dropping their old language like a hot brick in favour of no single language, unless other factors are at work, and a male-dominated world is prone to having their language win out, especially a simplified language. Plus, all the archaeological evidence shows the Northern Europeans and Scandinavians invaded in force, reasonable numbers that is. Even if they didn't burn down the buildings, those who came over in the 5th and to 7th centuries came in sufficient numbers to conquer the existing Britons. Mathematics has an answer to the invasion numbers problem. Invaders may have been lower than the male Britons who were wiped out, but then kept a number of wives. These would be looking after the farms. The Anglo-Saxon invaders may well have been outnumbered by the Britons by as much as 2 to 1. But remember, the story has them systematically moving through the country. This means they could, in some places, be few in number compared to the natives, but just taking on a few tribes at a time. And yet, because it was all male, this would leave a high percentage of Anglo-Saxon DNA relative to the numbers invading. But also for this thesis, it needs a low population, which is being attacked, which in turn means fewer invaders, being able to overcome them. More research needs to be done in this area. The devastation of the country was still quite extensive. Again, archaeology finds that buildings within cities were burnt to the ground, as well as some farms in rural areas. No doubt this might well be just plain and simple pillaging and vandalism. The Victorian historian John Richard Green in the late 19th century was quite prosaic on the subject. The victory of Aylesford did more than give East Kent to the English. It struck the keynote of the whole English conquest of Britain. The massacre which followed the battle indicated at once the merciless nature of the struggle which had begun, while the wealthier Kentish landowners fled in panic oversea. The poorer Britons took refuge in hill and forest, till hunger drove them from their lurking places to be cut down or enslaved by their conquerors. It was in vain that some sought the shelter within the walls of their churches, for the rage of the English seems to have burned fiercest against the clergy. The priests were slain at the altar, the churches fired, the peasants driven by flames to fling themselves on a ring of pitiless steel. It is a picture such as this which distinguishes the conquest of Britain from that of the other provinces of Rome. The conquest of Gaul by the Frank, or of Italy by the Lombard, proved little more than a forcible settlement of one conqueror or the other among tributary subjects who were destined in a long course of ages to absorb their conquerors. French is the tongue not of the Frank, but of the Gaul whom he overcame. But the English conquest was the sheer dispossession and slaughter of the people whom the English conquered. In all the worldwide struggle between Rome and the German invaders, no land was so stubbornly fought for or so hardly won. Wow. As the conquest moved forward, more invaders joined from the homelands. But how stubborn the conquest contest can be seen by the fact that it took 60 years for just the southern part of Britain. It was 6 years before the three coastal castles of Richborough, Dover and Lymm along the south coast fell to the English. There were three major centres from where the English came. Jutland in northern Holland provided the Jutes. Saxony was the home of the Saxons. Slightly to the north of this, Schleswig-Holstein, that connects Germany with Denmark, was home to the Angles, who gave us the name England, or Land of the Angles. Their languages were similar, and initially it was the Saxons who came in the largest numbers. Then, in 491, there were fresh gains at the fortress of Eyre at Pevensey on the English Channel, as the Saxons conquered the coast, then possibly started to move inland. The boats that were used are thought to be a style of longboat, but how well developed is open to debate. We are still not sure if they had sails at this time. The predominant thinking is they didn't, as the best example found has no mooring for a mast. Also, we don't know exactly how many people they carried. Perhaps 40, but again, we're not 100% certain, and we don't know enough of the lifestyle to guess at what was deemed safe, or more to the point, worth doing. How much in the way of cargo or provisions were carried? They are thought at this time to be straight-ribbed, so no heightened prow at the front or rear, and 10 to 14 benches seems to be the norm. It is obvious from the one contemporary history that is available, Gildas, that the Saxons had the upper hand, but no easy ride. There is also the probability that they took to securing their gains and then made further advances. So it may be that the propensity to settle was inbuilt from the beginning, and they may have made a point of keeping the captured land productive. What need they of cities? None, and the archaeological evidence backs it up. They had no educated classes. One was either a farmer come warrior, or a cut above and a chieftain, in other words, director of operations or colonel. There would be a blacksmith or ironsmith, and perhaps a potter, but these may well have been at this time part-time, or serviced 4 or 5 local villages. You lived in your small community of perhaps 100 to 280. After 300, the community would become unwieldy, so probably broke up, and new land sought. This may also have led to the slaughter of those in the cities. The Anglo-Saxons had no use for large towns, so kill everyone in them and steal all the movable goods, or put them into slavery. This is the likely scenario for the advancement over the next 100 years. Attack the local tribe, slaughter any male opposition, and those amenable sell into slavery, and have the women as concubines and keep the farm ticking over with the slaves. Then as a gift to your sons are the local girls, and a farm. He keeps an eye on the concubine, and if she already has a daughter, a possible future wife into the bargain. While keeping all this in mind, it must also be noted that the Anglo-Saxon invasion happened over a 200 years period. This is a long time for one peoples to be coming and fighting and conquering another. It may be that just ever larger numbers of Angles and Saxons started to come along, and their language came with them and stayed. As previously noted, the archaeological evidence doesn't fit the total burn and pillage line of thought. The genetics doesn't fit either. There is a line straight back to the Celtic Basque region of northern Spain, yet we know the Nordic invasions happened, and for the next 70 years after Hengist, the Angles and Saxons advance, gaining land here, then some there, but always expanding and maintaining the initiative. However, the advance came to a standstill in 520 AD. It is thought to have started to falter some time earlier. Unfortunately, our only source, the British monk Gildas, is patchy to say the least, but he provides us with a name, Ambrosius Aurelianus, who was a Christian king that managed to stall but not stop the Saxons. We know he was fiercely opposed to non-Christians. This name would later be changed, Anglicanized and used as a touchstone for some English, although the man himself seems to have hated the Anglo-Saxons because they were at the time not Christian, and we know him today as King Arthur, and his victory was at Baden Mount, or Mons Bodonicus, in 520. This stopped the English-Saxon advance, not only in the south but in the north, where the Angles had been advancing by means of the Humber that runs from the North Sea and then along its tributaries into the Trent and Ouse. Gildas does not even mention the north, so we don't know what other battles, if any, may have taken place. Our knowledge is from the archaeology and later suggestions in the ASC or the very unreliable Nennius, who was writing in the 9th century. It is clear, however, that it is a war of paganism versus Christianity, and Arthur represents Christianity and the remnants of the old Roman order. The Anglo-Saxons have come to a standstill. In the next episode, I will actually backtrack to describe how the Romans came to be in Britain in the first place. If you found this gradely, please click the like button and also recommend us to others, and click the subscribe button and ring that bell and get a weekly reminder of new videos. Remember, if you have a question or useful suggestions, leave a message in the comments column. And thanks for listening.